The tragic case of Amanda's death, a story of betrayal and violence. On December 19, 2020, Amanda Helus passed away in a hospital intensive care unit. The cause? A traumatic brain injury that resulted from what was initially reported as a fall down the stairs. But as investigators began piecing together the evidence, it became clear that Amanda's death was no accident. This was a case of domestic violence that had spiraled out of control, one filled with manipulation, betrayal, and a desperate attempt to escape justice. What started as a troubled marriage turned into a life-threatening situation, and by the end of it all, 2 people would lose their lives. This is the tragic and chilling story of Amanda Helus, her husband Brad, and the dark secrets that led to her untimely death. Brad's father, a hidden threat. Amanda had long struggled in her marriage with Brad. What began as minor arguments soon evolved into a cycle of emotional and psychological abuse. Whenever Amanda expressed her concerns or tried to confront Brad about his behavior, he dismissed her feelings, belittling her as if she was overreacting. But what made things worse was the presence of Brad's father, Scott Helus. Rather than being a neutral party, Scott actively defended his son's actions. Instead of helping Amanda, he escalated the situation with direct threats. "If you try to take my family away, I have connections who can make sure that doesn't happen," Scott had once told her. At that moment, Amanda realized she wasn't just fighting Brad, she was up against his father as well. A man willing to do whatever it took to maintain control. April 2020, the beginning of the end. In April 2020, an incident forced Amanda to take legal action. After one particularly violent altercation, she managed to obtain a temporary restraining order against Brad. However, despite the legal protection, nothing changed inside their home. Brad continued living under the same roof, ignoring the restraining order as if it didn't exist. He grew more aggressive, applying constant psychological pressure on Amanda. He would ignore her presence, make belittling remarks, and explode in anger over the smallest inconveniences. His behavior became unpredictable, making Amanda afraid to be around him. If before, he had at least tried to keep up the illusion of a functional marriage, now he openly showed his resentment. Doors slammed, objects were thrown, and his voice often echoed through the house. Amanda knew this was all about control, but she felt trapped, unsure of how to protect herself and her children. December 15, 2020, the final breaking point. The morning of December 15 started like any other. Amanda woke up early and followed her usual routine, getting ready for work, preparing breakfast, and organizing the day for her family. Brad remained in bed while their younger children were still asleep. Their 11-year-old son was already in the kitchen making himself something to eat. Before starting her tasks, Amanda grabbed her phone and began scrolling through social media. It was her morning ritual, a brief distraction. But then, something caught her eye. Brad had been commenting on other women's photos, again flirtatious, provocative messages left in plain sight for anyone to see. A familiar wave of frustration rose inside her. She had held on to hope for so long, hoping that Brad would change, that he would start valuing their family. But nothing had changed. Determined not to ignore it this time, Amanda walked into the bedroom and confronted Brad. The conversation started calmly, but Brad quickly became dismissive. "This isn't the time for this," he said, waving her off. But Amanda wasn't going to let it go. She demanded answers. She wanted him to acknowledge what he was doing. Brad's frustration turned into anger. His tone sharpened and his words became cutting. "If you don't like it, you can leave," he snapped. The words hit Amanda like a punch to the gut. After everything she had endured, after all the effort she had put into keeping the family together, This was his response. Her patience finally broke. Emotion overwhelmed her, and the argument spiraled out of control. The attack. Their 11-year-old son had been in the kitchen when he heard the shouting. He had become used to the tension between his parents, but something about this time felt different. He stepped into the hallway and saw his father grab his mother's wrist. Amanda tried to pull away, but Brad wouldn't let go. The boy froze. A second later, he saw his father strike Amanda across the face with an open palm, then clench his fist and hit her again. Amanda stumbled, then collapsed onto the floor. The boy stood motionless, unable to process what he had just witnessed. Amanda tried to get up, but Brad was already looming over her. For a brief moment, father and son's eyes met. The boy knew he had to get away. He turned and ran up the stairs, disappearing into his room. As he shut the door, he could still hear the sounds of the struggle below. Moments later, he heard his father dragging his mother downward toward a place where no one would see what happened next. The 911 call and hospitalization. Sometime later, Amanda lay at the bottom of the staircase. Her body was twisted unnaturally, her hair tangled, and a faint trace of blood stained the floor. She was still breathing, but barely. Brad found her unconscious and called for his father, Scott. Together, they attempted to wake her, but she remained unresponsive. Realizing the severity of the situation, Scott grabbed the phone and called 911. She fell down the stairs, he told the dispatcher. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Amanda's injuries were extensive: multiple bruises, swelling, and signs of restricted airflow. She was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. For the next 3 days, doctors fought to save her life, but the damage was too severe. On December 19, 2020, Amanda Helus passed away. The investigation. Brad insisted that Amanda had accidentally fallen down the stairs, but investigators quickly found inconsistencies in his story. The medical examiner reported injuries that couldn't have been caused by a simple fall: signs of strangulation, pressure marks on her arms, and bruising on her face. Then, the key witness spoke up. Their 11-year-old son revealed that he had seen his father hit his mother before dragging her downstairs. Neighbors and friends also confirmed that Amanda had been living in fear, afraid of what Brad might do. But before authorities could make an arrest, something unexpected happened. Scott Helus' sudden death. On Christmas Eve, December 24, 2020, Scott Helus was found dead in the shed behind his home. He had used a firearm on himself, leaving behind several handwritten notes. However, none of them contained a confession regarding Amanda's death. Instead, the notes were addressed to his grandchildren, expressing love, sorrow, and regret. News of Scott's death shocked the community, but it also added a new twist to the investigation. With his father now gone, Brad wasted no time trying to shift suspicion. He told police that Scott was the one responsible for Amanda's fatal injuries, implying that his father had played a role in the tragedy. However, investigators found no evidence to support Brad's claim. Scott had never been identified as a suspect, nor was there any forensic evidence linking him to the crime scene. Despite Brad's attempts to escape responsibility, law enforcement remained focused on the facts. In the end, the case against Brad remained strong, with all evidence continuing to point directly at him as Amanda's killer. Justice for Amanda. Despite Brad's attempts to manipulate the investigation, authorities built a solid case against him. The forensic evidence, medical reports, and witness testimonies left no doubt Brad was responsible for Amanda's death. Amanda's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the dangers of domestic violence. She tried to fight back, to seek legal protection, but in the end, she couldn't escape the cycle of control. Her passing devastated her family, especially her children, who had to witness the horrors of their own home. But one thing remains clear: the truth came out, and justice for Amanda was finally served. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, please seek help. No one should have to endure what Amanda went through.